This is Quick Sassy. I am a full-stack developer, over 14 years of experience, and I've been on both sides of the interview table. I've asked tough questions, and I've answered them too. And one of the most common topics in front-end interviews, Angular. Even in 2005, Angular remains one of the most in-demand skills, especially for high-paying roles in enterprise, finance, and government. Why? Because it is structured, scalable, and backed by Google. In this video, I will walk you through the first 5 must-know Angular interview questions and show you exactly how to answer them with clarity and confidence. Without further ado, let's get into it. For each question, I'll start by presenting it. Feel free to pause and think about your own answer. Then, I'll give you a quick version of what interviewers expect. After that, I will break it down step by step with code examples and real-world use cases, so you can truly understand the concept, not just memorize it. And stick around to the end. I will also share 2 bonus questions that can help you stand out in senior-level interviews.
What is data binding in Angular? Data binding allows synchronization between the model and the view. Angular supports 4 types of data binding, including interpolation, property binding, event binding, and two-way binding. Interpolation and property binding send data one way from component to view. Event binding sends data one way from view to component. Two-way binding, often using ngModel, enables simultaneous updates between view and component.
Let's start with interpolation, the simplest, sassiest. You use double curly braces to display values from your component in your template. So in our component, we have the name property. Now with double curly braces, we can output the value of the property. So as you can see, name has been assigned type sassy. And that's why in the view, we have Quick Sassy shows up. Next, property binding. This is where things get a little more exclusive. You bind a property of a DOM element to a value in your component using square brackets like value. Again, it is one way from component to DOM property. You are setting the value, but the input isn't allowed to speak back. Basically, this input is emotionally unavailable. As you can see, we assigned this property to the value property. And this property is in the component. Here in the component, I assigned this value to this property. And that's why this property shows up. You cannot type to this field. I even added a gray background to give it the true off limit tab. Let's talk about event binding. You use parentheses around click to handle events and execute methods in your component. This is from the view to the component. It is like saying, hi, Angular, the user just did something. In my example, clicking the button increases a subscriber count. And yes, I styled it like a YouTube subscribe button. So when I click on it, we can see the subscriber increases. Because who doesn't want to see that number go up, right? Let's last talk about two-way binding. We can use two-way binding use ng model to create a bidirectional data link between the component and input field. Changes in the UI reflect in the component and vice versa. ng model is a directive that internally sets both the value property and the input event to allow full two-way data binding. It is like a couples therapist. It listens to both sides and keeps them in sync. Two-way binding, when your input listens to you and talks back. Finally, a relationship that works both ways. So, for example, I assign the initial value of my input text to be we start casual as a fling. So basically, we start with this string. That is what assigned as the initial value. And then now we can change this to something else, like we are serious relationship now. So as you can see, the new value has been reflected. So if we look the code, basically outputting whatever the user typed. So let's recap for the data binding. We have interpolation, simple and direct. Property binding, one way from component. Event binding, listen to user input. And two-way binding, ng model, mutual understanding.
What is TypeScript? TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. TypeScript is JavaScript and added type. It is developed by Microsoft. It compiles to plain JavaScript.ts into JS. It is designed to help you catch errors at compile time, not runtime.
Why do we use TypeScript? To catch errors early and write more reliable code. TypeScript adds static typing to JavaScript, which helps you detect bugs at the compile time, not at runtime. That's smart autocomplete and ItaliSense in your editor. Write cleaner, scalable code, especially in large apps like Angular. So here are 7 TypeScript binding features. So the first is static typing. In TypeScript, you can declare types like this. If you try to change age to a string, TypeScript throws an error before your app even runs. That's how it catches bugs early and keep your code safe. Second is interface. Interface lets you define the structure of objects. Now, if your object is missing a property, TypeScript will let you know. Super useful for APIs and component inputs. The third, type aliases. Want to reuse a type or clean up a union type? Use the type aliases. Next, we have enums. They let you define a set of names constants instead of a magic string like admin. You get safe, readable code. Number 5, access modifier. Here, where TypeScript gets classy with access modifier, you can modify visibility using public, private, or protected. Number 6, generics. Need a reusable type-safe function? Use generics. Number 7, tuples. They are like fixed format arrays. The first value has to be a string, the second number when position matters like coordinates or name age pairs. Number 8, type inference. It is one of TypeScript's quiet superpowers. Sometimes you don't even need to tell TypeScript the type. It figures out for you.
What is dependency injection? Dependency injection is a design pattern used to supply objects, services, a component depends on. Instead of creating dependencies, Angular injects them. DI promotes modularity, testability, and cleaner code. It simplifies mocking for tests and centralizes logic and reusable services. Why do we use DI? Keeps components clean and focused, allows easy mocking for testing, centralized logic in services, Angular handles creation and lifecycle of dependencies.
Let's go through an example to see how to create a service and inject it by Angular. So step 1, in Angular, services are used to share logics or data across components. Here, I generate a service called user service using the Angular CLI. This creates a class that created with @injectable and sets provided in root, which means Angular will provide a single instance of this service across the entire application. Inside the service, we define a method called getUsers that simply return a list of names. Key point, by using provided in root, we make this service available application-wide without needing to manually register anywhere else. Step 2, inject the service into a component. Instead of creating an instance manually, we rely on Angular's dependency injection system by adding private user service in the constructor. Angular knows we need this service and automatically provides an instance for us. This is one of the most powerful features of Angular. No need for new user service. This makes your code cleaner, more testable, and easy to maintain. Step 3, use the service inside the init lifecycle hook. When the component is initialized, we will call this server service.getUsers to get the list of users and assign it to a local users array. Then in the template, we use ng-for to loop through the array and display each name in the list. This demonstrates the full flow. A service provides data, the components consumes it, and the view reflects it. Clean, efficient, and reactive, just like Angular is designed to be. Dependency injection in a nutshell. Create a service, decorate it with @injectable, inject in constructor, use service methods, let Angular manage it all. Here is a quick interview tip. Don't just give short textbook answers. Instead, explain how you've used the concept in your real projects, or break it down in more details to show your full understanding. This is how you stand out, by showing not just what you know, but how you've applied it in real-world scenarios.
The fourth question is, what is an observable? In Angular, observables are key for handling asynchronous data streams, such as HTTP requests or events. They represent a sequence of values emitted over time. You subscribe to an observable to receive these values, handle errors, or know when the stream completes. RxJS provides the necessary tools.
Where are observables used in Angular? Common uses of observable in Angular. HTTP requests, form input changes, route parameters, event streams, and custom service. So let's look at an example of basic observable. So here we have my observable. So we have 3 different messages. So each time the message is emitted. So basically, subscribe handles each immediate value. Here, let's see observables in Angular with HTTP client. This is a real Angular example using observables with HTTP client. Here, we have the implementation of user service. User service use an observable when it is getting a list of users from HTTP GET call. So the users arrive at different time, like a stream. And when we use the user service, we call subscribe to get each user's emitted from the HTTP GET call. Here's a summary for observables. Observable is used to handle async data. Observable is core part of Angular via RxJS. You subscribe to receive values, commonly used with HTTP forms routing.
What is an interceptor in Angular? An HTTP interceptor in Angular is a class implementing HTTP interceptor. It lets you inspect and modify HTTP requests or responses globally before they reach your backend or come back to the app. Think of it as a checkpoint for all your HTTP traffic. One of the most common uses of an interceptor is attaching a JWT token to each outgoing request, making your authentication logic clean, centralized, and secure. Instead of manually adding a JWT token to every request, an interceptor automatically attaches it. This simplifies authentication logic across your application.
Okay, let's go through the code of how to create an interceptor in Angular. First, generate the interceptor using Angular CLI command. This creates a file called auth-intercept.ts. Now, we will write code that checks for a token in the local storage and add it to each request. We check for the token in local storage. If it exists, we clone the request and use set headers to add authorization header. If there is no token, we will just forward original request. Next, we need to tell Angular to use this interceptor. Open app-module.ts and add the following to the provider's array. We register the interceptor using HTTP interceptors. Multi is set to true. Let Angular use multiple interceptors if needed. After a successful login, store the token in local storage like this, using method setItem. This simulates what usually happens when the backend sends you a JWT after logging in. Now, every request made using Angular's HTTP client will automatically include the token, and it will include the authorization header like this. So here is a JWT token looks like. It made of 3 parts: header, payload, and signature. You do not need decode it in your app. Just pass it securely in the header. Now let's take a closer look of the interceptor. We start by importing the necessary classes. HTTP interceptor is the key interface that lets us intercept outgoing HTTP requests. HTTP request, HTTP handle, and HTTP event are part of Angular's HTTP pipeline. Observable is used to return the response stream. We define a class author-intercept and mark it with @injectable. So Angular can inject it into the HTTP system. This class implements HTTP interceptor, meaning Angular will run it for every HTTP request. The HTTP intercept method is automatically called for each outgoing request. It gives us 2 things: the reg actual request and the next handler in the chain. Here we try to read the JWT token from the browser's local storage. Usually this token is saved after a successful login. If the token exists, we clone the request and use set headers to add an authorization header with the token. This ensures secure API access. If there is no token, we just send the original request without any modification. In summary, interceptors help you automate token injection, keep your code clean and secure, combined with local storage of service NGRX for full of control. Thank you so much for watching this far. I hope you've learned a lot. As a bonus, I want to leave you with 2 extra questions that are especially useful if you are preparing for a senior level Angular interview. This will help you go beyond the basics and show interviewers that you truly understand the framework at a deeper level.
What's new in Angular 18:19? Angular is constantly evolving. Recent versions like 18 and 19 introduce powerful new features. Look for zoneless change detection, improving performance, and standalone components, simplifying module structure. You'll also find function-based routing and enhanced developer tools. Staying current on these updates is crucial. It clearly demonstrates your technical depth and commitment in interviews.
Zone.js. In Angular 18, you can set a zone to be no op to disable zone.js because Angular doesn't know when asynchronous code runs. So zone.js watches for these operations and automatically triggers change detection. This as performance overhead. Now we're able to disable. In Angular 15 and above, you are now create components that don't need to be declared in an ng module. They are called standalone components. They simplify your project structure. Everything the component needs, like common module or other components, is imported directly inside the component itself. Angular 15 Plus also introduced function-based routing, which pairs beautifully with standalone components. Instead of using module-based routing or write verbals to an active guards, you can now use inline function for routing logics. This is especially useful when you want to perform dynamic checks like validating authentication or role-based access. This example checks if a user is logged in. If not, it redirects to a login page. Angular 18 also introduced enhanced developer tools that give you better visibility into your application's internals. Now you can trace routing events, visualize the dependency graph, and inspect signals or change detection behavior more easily. When you set enable tracing to true, this logs every navigation event in the console, perfect for debugging guards, lazy loading, or deeply nested routes. There is also improved support for inspecting signals and visualizing component trees and data flow through DevTools, making Angular much more developer-friendly.
How does Angular handle change detection? Angular's change detection tree keeps your UI synchronized with data. By default, Zone.js automates this on async operations like setTimeout or HTTP requests, and triggers change detection automatically. But in newer versions like Angular 18, zoneless change detection is becoming more popular. It gives developers more control and can improve performance in large applications. When and why to use lifecycle hooks like ng-on-changes and ng-do-check. How to manually trigger updates using Change Detector Ref, and how the on-push change detection strategy helps optimize performance by skipping unnecessary checks. Mastering change detection demonstrates readiness to build high-performance, scalable applications.
ng-on-changes used to respond when at input value changes, useful for reacting to parent to child data updates. ng-do-check Use it for custom change detection logic when Angular's default checks don't catch something. Great for detecting deep object changes or menu mutation. Last, we have change detection on push. With onPush, Angular only checks for changes if an input reference changes or an event happens in the component. Here's a great way to boost performance in large apps by skipping unnecessary tags. The last is zoneless mode, which I have already covered earlier. This is a recap. You can disable zones.js with zone set to no op. This gives you full control over when change detection happens, helping reduce overhead and improve performance in complex or real applications. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new about Angular. Let me know what other interview questions you want me to cover. Please like and subscribe. More videos to come.